Okay, excellent. Well, I'll bring the meeting to order on this November 9th of 2021, the Economic Development Subcommittee. The Economic Development Subcommittee will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom webinar. Committee members and staff are participating from remote locations and or practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda.
Members of the public wishing to speak during item 3, public comment, or during public comment hearing items will be able to do so by utilizing the raised hand feature, raising the raised hand feature, or by pressing *9 on their phone. They will then be given the ability to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And could I please have the roll call?
Yes. Chair Sawyer?
Here.
Member Fleming?
Here.
Member Alvarez?
Present.
Please let the record reflect that all subcommittee members are present.
Thank you, Clary. Next, I will ask whether there are public comments on topics not listed on our agenda today.
We have
do we have anyone?
We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So then we will move on with our agenda. And as per usual, it's not pulling up for me. I've been having issues with the internet all morning long.
So if you would like, the first item is going to be the Economic Development Draft Strategy Review.
And is that, Raisa, is that your item?
They're all my items.
I was going to say, is there anything that isn't your item this morning?
Yeah, we happily have a lot of help today in guiding us through the discussion. So Eileen, do you want to pull up thank you. Okay, so this first one, I just want to give you an overview on the strategic planning process we've been going through. And I know that I gave you a sort of written briefing on this, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to go over, personally, the process that we've been going through for this program. So next slide, please. Okay, so first off, there are a number of reasons why we needed to embark on the process. So despite the fact that it's been years overdue, the timing ended up being actually pretty good for us to start this. And while we've gone through a series of reorganizations over the years, and especially since the last time we did a comprehensive plan, I think what affected and sort of continues to affect us more are some of the changes, the organizational changes that have happened. And we had a good start on implementing some changes in the reorganization, but some of the elements of it sort of didn't end up really being completed, we sort of had some changes and movement and distractions, I have to say, through the emergencies over the years, as a result of some of the personnel changes and such that we've been going through. And also, I have to say, it's on the emergency front, it's just no small matter that we are actually making our way through the 4th year of emergency response and recovery efforts, and are on the precipice of getting a new city manager. So again, for this and many other reasons, it was a good time to really work to sharpen the edges of the economic development program. And so to do that, we started with the questions that you see on this slide, which are, what does the community want and need? Are there good models we can learn from? What's the current state of the division? And how can we leverage integration and partnership, knowing that so many of the economic development tools and resources lie in other departments and actually within the community itself. So next slide. So the other piece of good timing is that we ended up using a totally different consultant than I think we would have had we started this back in 2017. So I feel fortunate that we were able to contract with the social impact strategy firm Third Plateau. They're based out of Sacramento, but have done a lot of work within the county. And they led us through a very community-oriented, equity-centered process that is broken down in the phases that you see here. And where we are now is we just finished with the ideation phase, and we're heading into the iterative design phase. Now, kind of walk through what that means for you now. Next slide. So the first main phase was the learning phase, focused on research, interviews, focus groups, and a survey, as well as a SWOT analysis. And I have to say, the last time we did a comprehensive strategic plan, it was when I started. We did updates to the plan, but I started here about 15 years ago. And that was the last time we really dug deep into comprehensive plan. And I have to say that it was oriented in a more monocultural way, and was very focused on traditional businesses without as much consideration of sort of the workforce considerations that we brought into the fold this time. So for this, one of our objectives was to be at least a little bit more balanced, but obviously it being economic development, it's focused on business. And to this end, we were very intentional in being as diverse and inclusive as we could in planning for and also inviting involvement on our interview panels and our focus group, as well as the steering committee that we ended up with. And also, I have to say we did pretty good on the survey response rate, especially from our small business sector. We sent out the link to as many of those we could on our business tax certificate list that provided emails for us. Next slide. Oops. So between the survey interviews, the focus groups, and the research outlined on this slide, which just is really, it outlines our case studies and best practice approach, we were able to lay out a decent foundation and process heading into what Third Plateau calls the ideation phase. Next slide. So this phase is really, it's the steering committee, and it was an intensive 3-week process of three-hour meetings plus with our consultant team. So we had about oops, there. Sorry, I was wondering if that was my team's thing. We had originally invited 12 people to participate, but we had some last-minute cancellations, or one person just didn't show up. But it was a long and lot of intense conversation to get to the next slide, which is the draft elements of the plan. Next slide. So our draft vision is a healthy and thriving Santa Rosa community, fueled by the exchange of diverse ideas, innovative practices, and collective responsibility. And our draft mission that came out of the retreats is we drive increased access and systemic transformation in service of prosperity and opportunity for all community members. You know, I want to note here that strategic plans are generally best and really good for about a 3 to 5 year span. And we decided early that this strategy would be a 3.5 year plan, which we anticipate kicking off in 2022. We've been intentional in connecting our consultants with Seed Collaborative and making sure we're aligning with the work that they're doing. And then we also are working with the advanced planning team to ensure and maintain a connection with the general plan update. So Amy and Beatrice in particular have been incredibly helpful already as we embark on the iterative design phase to flesh out the 4 strategic focus areas here. And the other thing is, I just want to emphasize the word draft in this because we've already started to make some changes in wording so that it'll be reflective of the input that we're getting as we roll out the fleshed out plan. So the 3.5 year strategic focus is to establish the Economic Development Division as a champion of innovation and a key player, partner, and driver of transformation for the Santa Rosa community. And this, we're sort of thinking about things that we did, in particular, like through the economic recovery task force that we had, some of those kinds of programs, like being a receptor and being able to bring forward some of the policies and programs that council, actually, John and Victoria, you guys came up with, for example, in the last year and a half. The second thing is design and implement data-driven policies and programs to elevate support BIPOC, LGBTQ, and women-owned businesses and social entrepreneurs, giving back to the community. So we really did double down on the business sectors that have not been, that have been most affected in this last year in particular, and which have had a harder time receiving funding and support historically. The third thing is empower young people with the knowledge, skills, resources, and opportunities needed to positively contribute to the center as a community and economy. We're really focused on our future workforce, retaining our youth here and helping them reinvest in the place they call home. And then the last is to drive policies and support inclusive mixed-use multifamily housing in high resource areas and opportunity areas, which we actually changed this to simply say in priority development areas. So that is our draft outline, and I just want to open it up now for discussion if you have any questions or any thoughts or comments.
Well, I'm just going to throw out a comment. I mean, there are a few things more difficult in dealing with a strategic plan than coming up with a vision and a mission, and then a strategic focus, which is even more than I expected. I mean, they are one sentence in the vision and the mission, and those single sentences can take hours and days to develop. And so kudos in coming up with a clear and concise mission and vision. It's no easy task. So thank you for that effort. Victoria and Eddie, any questions or comments at this point?
Yeah,
Victoria.
thanks. Well done. And, it's really exciting to see this. And I do have a couple of questions about just the process in terms of, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how it went, about what some of the conversation pieces were, let us in a little bit to how some of the sausage was made.
Well, I have to say, when we were doing the interview process, firstly, none of the economic development staff was participated in the one-on-one conversations and the focus groups, because the consultant team really wanted a very honest feedback that would not be censored if we were in the room. And so it was interesting to see the SWOT analysis that came out of it. There was no surprise to us. And honestly, I expected, it wasn't exactly always easy to read, but there were no surprises. And I expected more surprises because at the time, there was a little bit of confusion. The Economic Development Board is going through a strategic planning process as well. So there was some level of confusion that we had to address in differentiating ourselves from the county program, which is very typical. If I say I work in economic development for the city of Santa Rosa, they used to say, "Oh, you work with Ben Stone." So there's still some confusion on that. But and then the other thing that was interesting is, especially during the steering committee and the retreats that we had, we spent some time in differentiating the desire of the community, or I don't know how to put this, but there was there was conversation around an economic development strategy that should be more integrated into a citywide strategy, and differentiating what's possible through the economic development division in coordination, and again with the support of and partnership of all the departments in it. So how to set a focus and a vision that is ours, but there was a lot of questioning, why isn't this a citywide thing. And I'm like, well, number one, the city isn't going through this process, the economic development division is. And two, it's not to say that it is inconsistent with council goals and the city mission broadly. So I think those are two of the things that I would highlight. And actually, Socorro, really quickly, Socorro was in the steering committee with us. Is there anything that you would add to that?
Good morning. I would just reiterate, it is interesting kind of department strategic plans with the attention of the citywide kind of vision and priorities. But I think that kind of the clarity that equity and what the council has said our priorities will guide the economic development plan were clear. And I think that will make for an easy layering with the city's ongoing efforts.
Thank
Great.
you.
So then, wow, it's really great. I'm really glad we're doing this and that you're doing that you put in all this effort to do this. It's fantastic. What I'm wondering is, if it's a draft, are you interested in any kind of additions or feedbacks, or is it a draft in terms of what are the next steps?
Well, we have, the answer is yes, we always want it. I mean, iterative doesn't even mean that it's not going to change once we, sort of finalize, air quote, finalize the report itself. So any feedback is always helpful and can help inform the plan moving forward. In this phase in particular, again, this is just the outline. We have socialized the outline with the steering committee members, and through this process are sort of making it a little bit more public, and would absolutely welcome any feedback, questions or comments as we roll towards the fuller report.
Okay. And then I have one more question before I give you just a couple of thoughts, which is why 3.5 years? It's a very specific amount of time.
Well, we wanted to start in January, and we wanted to align it with the fiscal years eventually. It is a very specific amount of time, but with all of the changes that we're seeing, it felt a little bit more doable, and we want to be able to come back in 3 years, honestly, and start the process again. We're particularly interested in the general plan update. They've got, I think, another 2 years. I think Amy and Beatrice are on, they can correct me, but just the planning for the general plan update is another 2 years, and it would be opportunistic for us to, as that plan rolls out, to be able to reassess and realign given where we are then. And I had to say, the economy is up and down. It's just a really difficult time period to say, oh yeah, in 5 years, we're going to be where we are now then.
Yeah, it is a really unusual time. And yet I think that what you put into it, I mean, famous last words, is kind of timeless, because I can't imagine us not wanting to have an inclusive Santa Rosa where everybody can participate to the best of their ability, and it includes everybody. There were a few, and that I think that this is something that the entire city ought to look through this lens of equity, environment, and I'm losing my last E here, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So, but there's a few words that were not on there that I was looking for. One is, well, I wasn't looking for it, but it kind of struck me when we were talking about most impacted businesses. And I was thinking, it's not just like women-owned and BIPOC businesses, but it's specifically immigrant businesses. And I'd love to have a word in there or something in there that calls out that we value and want to promote our immigrant businesses in the city. They're one of our strongest drivers of small businesses, and one of the things that makes Santa Rosa a really interesting and wonderful place. And I know that they've had a real rough go of it. I'd like to see the environment or the climate mentioned in there. If I missed it, I apologize. And I'd love to see something, because there's a big piece about housing. I'd like to see housing mentioned in relationship to high quality transit as part of our climate goals. And I'd love to see something about promoting and developing our labor force and supporting them. But I think that those are all very much in line with what I saw. They're just particular things that I thought are values of ours that we might want to consider calling out. I think this is fantastic.
And I think, some of those, because the immigrant population did come up a lot in our, well, I don't want to say a lot, but it did come up in our conversations in the retreat. And some of those might be more specifically called out in the tactics that would be set to accomplish the goals.
Okay.
But I definitely hear you on those. I don't think we talked as much about environment and climate. Though I think in the next presentation, you'll see that we're considering that in data and in our equity lens that had that overlay specific to environment and environmental impacts on communities.
Yeah.
So I think we'll work on that. That's super helpful because I think there are some of those that we could reinforce.
I'll offer you just this anecdote, maybe it'll make you chuckle, which is last night at work at the county. I have a very conservative coworker who was watching Fox News on her earbuds, and I walked behind her, and the headline on Fox News was "Majority of young people have climate anxiety," and I was like, "Whoa, Fox News has picked this up." So, anyway, thank you so much, you guys.
Thanks, Victoria. Eddie, any questions?
I'm laughing at the climate anxiety. I mean,
Yeah.
what a terminology, right? To echo my colleagues, I mean, just a great job, and for my colleagues as well, who have been here for much longer than I have, and the input that they've been able to give. I guess the only question left is, what were the lessons learned? We'll be revisiting this in 3.5 years. What would we apply that you felt you could have applied this time, and kind of put that into the book, so when that time comes, we can be looking for those things and possibly remind, hey, I remember when you said this, as a friendly reminder, and for us to really just play with it in our mind and see how we can assist you in doing so.
It was disappointingly difficult to get. I had to do a lot of convincing to get our BIPOC community to participate. And I would hope that in 3.5 years, I would hope that in 6 months or 1 year, we have a different relationship with that community. I think, some of it was technical, some of it was trust, some of it was time and timing. But that is something that I'm really grateful that we spent the time and really encouraging people and really looking beyond those we typically ask. I was particularly interested, for example, I did some Googling, was like, let's get the president of the SRJC student union. She's a woman of color, she's young, how to engage these folks. I think I learned how difficult that is. I learned that there are some changes that we can make to make that kind of participation, especially also monolingual participation, easier. So I think that I would highlight that, and also personally the time it takes to email thousands of businesses who have emails with them. I'd like to do that better and earlier. Yeah.
Did you have? Go ahead, Eddie. Oh, you're on mute. It's the John.
And I could have swore I hit that button, John. I now I have a better understanding of what you go through.
Thank you.
But nonetheless, though, hopefully, as I learn the position that I'm in, I can hopefully contribute to those efforts. I'm happy to say that I do see and I've said it plenty of times, I see different eyes in the community. Hopefully, you're starting to see the same. We're starting to see more organization, more individuals stepping forward, and hopefully it gives fruit that we're all looking for. And maybe now with Seed Collaborative, we can incorporate it and really, for myself, speaking for myself, learn from their efforts of how they've conducted themselves, move forward, and what has worked and what hasn't worked for them. As I'm definitely in the learning stage, so hopefully I can be a contributor to those efforts, and together we can clear that hurdle.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. And to that point, I just want to call out Raphael in particular on our team because, you know, when we're out in the community, I say I work with Raphael. He knows people. He speaks with people. He is out there on the streets every day in so many different ways. And, you know, he is our, I think, our trust vault in the community. And I don't think I would have had as much access as we did and as much participation as we did, especially again with monolinguals, the Latinx population, were he not involved. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal partner.
And that's a great point. Before being elected, before even deciding to run for city council, Rafa is the person that I could always count on seeing running up and down Sebastopol Road and always carrying something, whether it was a banner, whether it was a notepad, whether it was a book or a flyer. You're absolutely correct in saying so, and definitely a hero for the community. Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to jump in again. I remember in days gone by, relatively speaking, the narrow scope of economic development. And it had more to do with bringing in a national chain or helping our current, or at the time, the current businesses which were struggling mainly in downtown, which is a continuing theme. But never were the words diversity, equity, and inclusion added to any kind of conversation around economic development. The evolution of ED is really quite substantial and very beneficial to our community. And that department, due to the activities and the leadership of your team, you and your team, Raisa, and Socorro, and I mean, there are so many people to thank to acknowledge the evolution of economic development in Santa Rosa. I mean, it has almost flipped from where it was before, very much status quo, and now it is not. And it's a breath of fresh air to see. It opens up doors that were not open before, and acknowledging individuals that are looking for economic development and economic success that were not at the table before. And so I really kudos to everyone involved in changing the dynamic and the paradigm of economic development in Santa Rosa. So I'm so pleased.
Can I just touch on that for one moment? And that is, you know, we are still going to continue on the business attraction, retention, expansion component of it. We're doing it a little bit differently, but, you know, we have myself and Raphael, who are economic development program focused, myself and Tara, who are arts, events, and that other component. We've been able to merge sort of we have limited funding sources, but we've been able to merge the arts program and the tourism programs to be economic development driven. But Tara really doesn't focus on the day-to-day ED kind of stuff. And then we have Eileen, our fabulous host here today, who deals with the daily calls, with the coordination of these things. So it's a small team. And because it's small, because resources are limited, we're super reliant on the chambers of commerce. So we do have good relationships with the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber and the Hispanic Chamber, and in the Downtown Action Organization and Railroad Square Association. And those groups, as well as some of our other ones like Los Cien and other business-oriented groups, if we did not partner with them, we would not be able to do as much of the attraction and retention as that we have. We have to look at our team more broadly than the four of us who are employed by the city. So I just want to super confirm that we're continuing in some of the other more traditional things, in particular with partnerships, but we do have to double down on the under invested areas that we had not done previously.
I appreciate that because, yeah, and in my comments, I didn't mention the more traditional approaches, and they are clearly being embraced because we need them as well. We need everything. We need all the tools, and I'm very pleased that your department is exercising those. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, if there are no other questions or comments from council, I'd like to open it up to the community. Eileen, could you let the community know how they can participate? And you already did, actually. So do you see any hands raised at this point?
We do. Mr. Farron, I'm going to go ahead and give you permission to speak. And if you would hold just one moment while I share the timer. If you would confirm that you're able to see that.
Yes, I can.
Wonderful.
I won't take the full 3 minutes, but I also want to thank staff for what they've done. This is brilliant and bold, and I think it's very consistent. And this is the point I want to make. Some of you know I'm on the ARPA County Committee, and we're going to be providing millions of dollars into the same effort that you're trying to do. We're going to be gathering lots of data, lots of tools. We're going to be hiring dozens of Raphaels, and we're going to try and figure out ways of really helping the community you want to serve in this, including the traditional businesses, to recover and to be able to address the impacts of the coronavirus in ways that are based on equity, based on giving support to folks who haven't been in the system. So I just want to, remind you that there is this, I've been involved with Santa Rosa more than the county, but believe me, now I've got the county at least listening, and the 14-member committee that I serve on is not going away and is going to be able to try to direct in as much as they can the $76 million that we've got to spend on ways that do exactly what you're talking about. So we're with you. I'm with you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Any other hands raised, Eileen?
We do not have any additional hands raised at this time.
Okay. And any other comments that were given to us in any other forum?
We have not received any email or voicemail comments for this meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you, staff, for a great presentation. It's really a tribute to your dedication to this cause and the broad scope, which is really important. So thank you for that very much. So let's move to 3.2, Rosa.
Okay, for this one I have help, and okay, good. So for this item, our goal is to lay out an equity lens framework for you to consider. So it stems from, really from you guys, from the full council, because you've talked for quite a while now about equity principles, which you really doubled down on, and we were able to flesh out specifically for the ARPA funding discussions. So for this, I have Beatrice and Socorro here with me today to introduce the why and the what in terms of what might be helpful moving forward, if it's of interest to council. Basically, it's an outline of considerations that might be helpful as we contemplate, I mean actually the city, but really city council contemplates opportunities to reinvest in communities, as we just talked about, that have historically been underinvested in. And so we'll go to the next slide, and I'm just going to hand it right over to Beatrice to start us out.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you for the invitation. I am very happy to be here. Just wanted to say that we're going to present this to City Council next week, but you will have a preview, and I would love to have your feedback on this opportunity that we have to present equity priority communities. And basically, the conversation that we have been having with the economic development team, as well as the equity officer, has been how do we create data sets for providing equity, including equity in the conversation. And so for the planning department, specifically for the outreach group, we have been working on identifying what it means, areas of vulnerable, underrepresented, and historically marginalized populations. And the way that we identified this was following the Metropolitan Transportation Commission methodology, and they call it equity priority communities. This is a way to shift the conversation from just vulnerable communities or communities of color or underrepresented communities. We want to say, how are we going to change what happened in the past? Acknowledge that we have had policies that were discriminative or that created disadvantages in the communities, and how are we shifting that to prioritize certain areas of the city. And specifically for this one, you can see the city limits are on the orange area, and the orange line, those are the city limits. And then we have on the blue area, it's we created the data sets to identify in the county of Sonoma specifically, which are the top 25% census groups, which is a very small area where we can track where people of color live. The highest percentage of people of color, and those are the blue areas. And for the yellow areas, we have the top 25% census group where lowest income or people living in poverty live. So we did an intersection of these two different data sets, and we created the green areas where we define the green areas, which are our equity priority areas, which means areas with a significant concentration of low income households, as well as a high percentage of people of color. Why are we doing this? Just tracking on all the research that has been done in the United States, not specifically for Santa Rosa, but for the whole country, on how to identify the areas that have been underinvested, not only in terms of economic development, but also infrastructure planning and other policies that have created segregation in the cities. So that's basically the explanation of these equity priority communities. And I don't know if we can go to the next slide, just to show you what else we have in the tools. We created a data set where anyone in the city, not only the teams, but people coming from any place in any resident, and people even from outside of Santa Rosa, can access information related, for example, to health insurance. How are these areas that we tracked similar to the equity priority areas? And you can see on the first map that we have, we're talking about the percent of people without health insurance. And you can see that the pattern is very similar to what we saw on the equity priority areas. Then on the right, we have below poverty, which is the map that I showed before, but with all the intersections. And down on the left, we have people of color population. This, by the way, is information from the 2020 census. So this is the most updated data that we have for the city of Santa Rosa. And then on the right, lower right side, you can see percentage of people without high school diploma. So we can see definitely a path, a pattern that can tell us that a lot of the variables that we analyze are, this is not only people of color and poverty, but we're also seeing a lot of paths where we need people to provide to be provided with support for education, for health, for other different services and policies that we can change in the city, and some others that need to be changed by state or federal level. But we would start in the local level, and I think Raisa was right to bring this to the conversation. And I know this is not the time to talk about this specific data set, so I will leave Socorro and Raisa to come into the conversation. This was just the methodology that we followed and the tools that we have, and that would be available for the rest of the teams in the city to use.
And I do want to reiterate that these are just samples of the data set that Beatriz has been working on. So some of the environmental elements of it, she's been pulling data to track that, and it's of interest because this data is core to the process and program for the economic development strategy. And this is where we're beginning to see alignment in our efforts through the data and through the general plan update. So we can go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Socorro, but I just want to say, as I mentioned originally when we started this, that ARPA is the first time we really defined an equity overlay consideration by which to sort of rank funding proposals specific to sustainability, economy, and equity. And I have to say, to City Manager Colin's credit, he was really receptive to the idea to adding these elements, which really helped us look deeper and gave us permission to sort of dig deeper in the social and community impacts of the proposed expenditures related to ARPA. And so I want to hand it over to Socorro to lead us through, if you have anything else to mention on this slide, as well as the next one, Socorro.
Well, I just want to ground us so that ARPA is an accelerant, right? It definitely is a federal requirement. It's embodied in the ARPA legislation that we acknowledge the disparate impact that COVID had, that the economic kind of crisis that followed COVID had, and that it is built into how we think about this next level of investment. And so what we're proposing, and so in ARPA, for example, it identifies the qualified census tracts. And they have their way of identifying through poverty the areas that require deepened investment. And so the language for the qualified census tract and this ARPA equity overlay will stand true throughout our discussions about what ARPA is. What we want to do, though, is seed with you and get feedback on what might be our next step. One of the council people you mentioned kind of being in a learning stage. And I think it's important for us as an organization to always be in a learning stage and always making improvements and always moving forward and always learning and growing across the organization. So we're always presenting the strongest, most current efforts, language, innovations to be serving our community. So this should be feeling a little more comfortable since the ARPA first discussion. We'll have our next one at the end of the month, but throughout the life of the ARPA discussion, these will hold true and consistent. Next slide. This, though, might be clarity on once we are able to, so that was a federal mandate, federal dollars, and then we'll also have, to Raisa's point, the economic development strategic plan. We'll start having local, more contextualized to Beatrice's work and the maps that aren't just qualified census tract, but add more local context into areas that we're saying have priority and should be equity drivers. So when we think about now how we're going to define equity, the council's been pretty clear in the 3 pillars of climate justice, economic justice, and social justice. We haven't used those words per se yet, so this again is perhaps an evolution or a first round at what might be an evolution in how we think about this. Councilperson Fleming, you mentioned adding in language about the climate action plan, and so we might even refine this language to mention that as we consider environmental equity and climate justice and the burdens that some of parts of our community face, right? So there's that pillar, then there's the economic justice, which we've been talking about this morning, and the evolution of that from being, of course, we want all businesses to succeed. That goes without saying. And then we're recognizing, like ARPA did, that not all businesses respond to crises in the same way. Some, and again, Councilperson Fleming, you called this out specifically, immigrant status affects what access you have to federal relief. And so, that alone as a layer changes how our businesses have access to supports and those types of things. So there's the economic justice and being very specific in that. And then the last is in terms of community facing equity is social justice, whose voices are included, who's at the table, who is helping define what success is, what the problem is, the types of solutions that need to be in the table, and how implementation is going, because we know even with great plans, sometimes the way things are implemented, there's a distance between what we thought would happen and what actually happens. But then the last one, and this goes to another council person mentioned, kind of learning. Are we learning? First of all, is there access? Does everyone have access to the way in which cities the city makes decisions and the city making structure for these decisions? And then the other part of that, though, is, are we always learning? So if one part, so I think, again, for an example, using economic development learned a lot, even if there wasn't as much community participation. There were certainly elements that in this round of interaction and relationship building with the community that economic development learned, how do we share that across the organization? How do we kind of break some of these silos to make sure that we're proactively learning everything we can about the community? So as we all go to serve all these different members and parts and pieces of our community, we have this growing and strengthening knowledge about the needs of who our community is and how they're benefiting or not from decisions we're making, and how to make that clear. And then finally, in terms of place-based strategies, again, recognizing that ARPA had us really focusing on the qualified census tracts, which is a great kind of way to think about place-based investments, understanding that we can dive deeper, as Beatriz demonstrated, kind of with the layers of more specific information that we have in our community, and really locate areas that are qualified census tracts, but also a little bit more in terms of areas that need specific investment, have been historically underinvested in, and may at this time require a greater percentage of effort to kind of reach the expectation we hold for all of the ways that we support, whether it's businesses, communities, community-based groups, all of those things in our community. So again, this is just kind of perhaps a next step at thinking about how are we going to internally and to our community define, when we say equity, what does that mean we're looking at? How does that mean we're thinking about these things? What is grounding our decision making as we move forward? But certainly a place for feedback, things you would to use that example, words you might be looking for or think are important kind of trigger words for how we're talking about this, or other comments and feedback.
Great clarifications and presentation. Thanks, Socorro. Council, questions or comments?
Yeah, this is really, really exciting stuff to see. I feel like, some of the reasons why I wanted to be on the council in the first place are sort of beginning to come to fruition, and really just seeing that it's being put in words and in work plans and goals is really exciting. I did want to, on the early slide, there was something about the 3 pillars, and one of them was sustainability. And I just wanted to note that I think it's really important that we have environmental sustainability be clear, because I think that the word sustainability means so many things, and I just want to make sure that when staff is looking at this stuff, that we know we're talking about our environment or our climate. And then the environmental justice piece I think is lovely, and I want to make sure that we also just expand it to climate, our climate concerns more broadly. Obviously, we have to be especially attentive to the ways that this impacts our communities of color and our lower income communities. But we need to make sure that we don't do really anything at this point that harms the environment, regardless of where it is or with whom it is. So those are just a couple of my pieces of feedback. And I'm a little jealous that I don't get to work on this, with you guys. So I look forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Victoria. Eddie?
Thank you. For myself, and off the word sustainability, it's what can we do to fund these programs so that they're not unsustainable. I see that there's certain departments within the city of Santa Rosa who do have a budgeted future that they can count on, and this allows them to be proactive, to assure that they will be around tomorrow. And it's more of a comment than a question of us showing that we are serious about the different justice, the different programs, and that we do want the citizens to know that we're serious about this. And when you ask me how can we make that happen, I believe it comes down to funding these programs, to assuring that they have a vibrant future. And I guess that really depends on us as a city council to assure that. Again, it's more of a comment than a question. I appreciate the report and really the focus that we are implementing into the system. And you have to excuse my dogs in the back. They apparently don't like the rain.
Thanks, Eddie. And we'll all have an opportunity to go down the fiscal road next year when we're deciding on our budgets and where we put our priorities. So, and the difficult challenges therein. So we will be addressing that next year. Do we have any members of the public, Eileen, that would like to address this issue?
We have no raised hands at this time. Oh, pardon me, we do. Mr. Farron, just one moment while I pull up the screen. And Mr. Farron, if you would confirm that you're able to see the timer?
Yes, I can. I just have one request. I just looked through the legislative listing on the city website as to whether or not these meetings have ever been posted as videos, and only found one back in August. I'd like to request, because I want everybody in the city to see this meeting, and I want everybody on my 14-member board to see this meeting, that you make a regular habit from now on of making sure that the meetings you have are posted, the videos are live, whether you put it on YouTube or you put it on your own system. But let's get it as easy as possible for people to be in sync with what you're trying to do and how they can participate. It's partly why I've been dogged and trying to make sure that Comcast publishes your meetings, that we have an easy way for the public to learn about what it is you're doing and how they can fit in. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just, because it is important, and we had some technical difficulties in and understand now how we have to make that happen. So we're trying to go back and do that. And I know Eileen is going to put this one up probably today, now that we understand how to do it. And we'll try to go back and do that with our previous ones eventually as well.
Great. Thanks, Raisa. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Beatrice, for your part in this. I know it was, none of these are any small endeavors. And I really appreciate the hard work that's going into this in changing the paradigm of how we operate as a city. These are no small tasks, and the successes will be well worth the effort. So thank you all very, very much. Raisa, 3.3.
Okay, so this is the last thing. I just have to remind myself what we're talking about. Oh, the one-time funding. I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to provide any additional input specific to the items from economic development that we're putting forward. And to let you know, in preparation for the next study session, firstly, it's been an incredible team effort. And we're all trying to row in the same direction and sort of elevate programs. But the items that we're moving forward with and sort of adding additional investments into our the child care support program. And what's interesting about this, and I wanted to sort of call it out, and I have Socorro here still, because we've decided to sort of take and expand our original child care support pilot program. And we still have $1.4 million left in that fund that's going to go into a facility fund that we want to perpetuate. So we're looking at that being a no interest revolving loan program. But the additional funds, as I hope we've made clear of the last study sessions for the ARPA money, will be grant specific portion of the child care facility fund. What we're seeing is that we've got new developments that are incorporating childcare within it. So they're getting a shell. And we need to have more money than we anticipated to make the childcare affordable by assisting them to a greater degree on the build out of the shells. So it's tenant improvements that include the inside and outside, as well as the equipment to create a high quality childcare center. These are going to be done in the quality, the QCTs, qualified census tract areas. So consistent with the ARPA directive, and where we're actually seeing more of the brand new development. The other portion of it, though, is that we're also seeing an emergency fund need for grants. So for example, we had one from a couple of years ago in the last rain event, and one this time where we're seeing catastrophic failures of the facilities themselves. So it's a rehabilitation of facilities. And there's two portions. One could be rehabbing, not in an emergency event where they're looking to upgrade and address issues with the sites that currently exist, because we need to retain as many as we can. But the other is an emergency response grant, again, like the one that just shut down. It's infant toddler, which is one of our highest needs, and they are no longer able to operate, and we're scrambling to find them a new facility that's temporary and get their old one up and running. And there are no funds to be had for this, so we're adding that element into it. The other thing is there was an interest in like the baby bond concept. And so we thought, all of this dealing with childcare, let's sweep it into that program. And so we're looking at, instead of sort of baby bonds, we're working again with First Five on a college savings account. And then the third piece of it that we're adding into this, that we're seeking funding for through ARPA, is the Family Child Care Shared Services Alliance. So this idea that we have affordability and access, we have facilities, but we also have wages and resources. So we really need to establish the three-legged stool for this industry to sit upon. And so we're thinking that these things again are adding to that. Anything you want to talk about, Socorro, on the childcare support program, the children in childcare support program that we're doing?
I just encourage us also to think about it as a micro entrepreneurial start. So what it would do, it would help support in our QCTs, specifically in Roseland, of course, starting, it would help lift new small businesses that are focusing on infant and toddler childcare, and investing and assisting in helping them stand up as a business, helping them have financial coaching on kind of creating the quality situation. So it is twofold in that it both serves the need we have in the community for infant and toddler childcare, which, as Raisa was saying, is one of the hardest to do. It is almost always best received in home childcare centers because of just many parents and families don't want to be putting their little one in a huge kind of center-based facility. And so the trust factor in smaller home-based centers is much higher, particularly culturally. And so it would both serve that need and it would lift bilingual, bicultural women as business owners starting in this vein, and coach and facilitate them through growing that business out. So it would be, it's a win-win-win. It's just a beautiful win-win-win. And working with someone like First Five, who brings in both the business aspect and the quality childcare aspect, is really a strong partnership.
Outstanding. I love the expansion of the horizon of and identifying what's really important and how to get raising that comfort level, being aware of that and responding to that as quickly as possible, because it's we certainly need the services. I'm curious about one thing. Well, go ahead, Raisa.
Well, I was going to say there's two other things that we're bringing forward, but I think you know about them. Again, UBI, we're trying to reconnect with universal basic income. Sorry, we're trying to continue the conversations with the county and with Oscar Chavez and the work that they're doing. So we're fleshing that out a little bit more and calling out where we might see some flexibility in our program to better align with theirs. The timing is right, but they had sort of where we came up with our funding proposal was honestly through the mayor's Facebook page and understanding what, how we want to invest in it. But I think any funding that we put towards a program that is coordinated and that aligns and overlays with the other social services networks is good. So we're moving forward with that. And then really, we heard what you said about, we took the feedback and we're trying to interpret the feedback from the last study session. And we're looking at additional investments and programs in our most needy areas, such as Roseland. And we're putting together some bold proposals and some backup plans for that specifically. So that ends what I wanted to say.
Excellent, thank you. I do have one clarifying question about the baby bonds, which I think is this classic upstream investment that is really exciting. But I had mentioned before about the investments and how to parlay the monies that we would originally, the seed monies, and then how to determine the best place to put that money, because it's going to sit for a long time, and it's $1 million. And if we were to, and assuming that we went forward with that, which I expect we would, how to best invest that $1 million so that when they finally end up going into a college program, that money has been growing steadily and carefully during the years. Have you tackled the investment concept yet, or is that still kind of pending?
Well, it works with the state and federal 529 college savings plan. So it's really kind of has a research base of how it works and how those monies are invested. Because you're right, it does. Well, and that's the whole goal, right? That it's compounding over time. And so initial investments early are growing over time. And so we can have the investment mechanism behind that. I do believe First Five has identified a banking partner. The other is that for the college savings program, we would be matching First Five investments. So there's an initial investment, and then they're kind of like bonus investments for the more interaction that the family is having with the program. So whether it's financial literacy coaching or post-secondary education, which is college and all other forms of post-secondary education, right? So it does lend itself to strong trades, further education in the trades industry and construction and all of those things, kind of so that students have broad opportunities for financial security after high school. So we can make sure at the council meeting, we have a little bit more information on the investment strategy behind the 529 investments, but we would be working with certified banks and the certified program so that the money would be handed out actually within the 3 years to the families and would be sitting carefully monitored and invested for the families through financial institutions.
Outstanding. I love the idea that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's certainly not something we want to have to do if we don't have to. So thanks for that clarification. I know that the council will be pleased to hear more detail in that program, because it is exciting and just a real boom to education. I love that. I love the diversity of educational concepts from the trades. They just, as opposed to a traditional, you're going to college or you're not. Well, there's a lot of people, myself included, that did not go to a university, and I'm so pleased to hear of the variety of opportunities that we're giving our youth, because not everyone wants to stay in school, and there are all sorts of other educational opportunities. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And I think one of the key points, John, super quick, is that we're trying not to reinvent anything, because we have a finite period of time in which to expend these funds. And so we are being, at least the ones that we're proposing here, are being really specific about aligning with existing programs or leveraging existing programs so that we can get the funding out as quickly as possible. But and something that's really super important to that I was speaking for myself is it's how do we seed something that will allow the perpetuation of a program. So the programs are not, okay, we're out now, we're done, sorry, but really intended to sort of introduce something that potentially has the ability to live on its own with that push that the city's giving it.
Yeah, that's vital. I appreciate that. Thanks. Eddie, questions or comments?
I do have one actually, and it's perfect timing. Sometimes you can't align the stars any better. This morning I had a constituent reach out and asking about starting a daycare. So if I could, and definitely I'll be taking notes on this, what is the current process to start a daycare from someone's home? And what are the proposed changes that would apply to facilitating the process for a person to begin a daycare?
Well, so one of the things that we did with the first round of funding is we supported 4Cs in expanding their sort of training program, and they have a program specifically for 4Cs that helps people get licensed and set themselves up in business. And I have to say that is where I recommend anyone start. And I will say too that family childcare, home-based childcare is the bulk of our system. And so this is why we're not being discriminatory on how we spend the funds, but that we are ensuring that, again, through a micro-entrepreneurialism sort of business model, that they're supported as well. But my recommendation is that they start with 4Cs. 4Cs and First Five are active partners in us in advancing this. And I will say too, just kudos to the planning department, because we actively worked to streamline the childcare permitting process. So even if there is a cost to a permit, once you open, it is reimbursed to you so that there is no cost. You just need to prove that you've opened your doors, and that we've made it so that childcare is allowable in almost any zoning land use in any land use type, except for like heavy industrial or something where you wouldn't want it anyway. But so the process for the city is actually quite streamlined, and 4Cs understands that process and can help with that as well. And then other than that, most of the regulations are state level, and through the lobbying and concerted efforts of organizations like 4Cs and First Five statewide, we're looking to align more and make it easier at a state level as well.
And like I say, you did state that after completion once you open your doors, the cost is reimbursed.
That's correct. So we reimburse the cost of the, I think if not all, most of the permit fees that are city specific. And then he'll, should we get funded through the ARPA dollars, he'll have access to grants through the ARPA, and eventually also, because it's a two-part program, to no interest revolving loan funds as well.
And you just brought up another question when it comes to ARPA. How's that looking for the community? And it's one thing that I've brought up a couple of times of Rosa being able to, I feel, qualify for many of the services or funding, that's being provided through ARPA. I imagine we're still looking at the different possibilities of finding sources through ARPA.
We are, and what's interesting, I don't want to be, I don't want to jump the gun on something, but with the economic development strategy and some of the funds that we understood as a group that council wanted to sort of realign perhaps to better be more available to the community directly. We're actually, the staff working group is looking at proposals to bring to council at the next study session, where you might see sort of a change in what some of those funds are. We're just going to be discussing with staff what that looks like, and what the possibility is of having a site and community center and a different presence in Roseland in particular, And short of having a community center, for example, what are the other secondary programs that we might be able to fund? So we're just laying those out to be able to bring to you realignment of those funds on the 30th.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the update on that.
Thanks, Eddie. Victoria.
Yes, all good stuff here. I'm curious to know about, you brought up some changes to the $1.4 million. Is that money still all staying in the childcare business realm? And then the UBI and the baby bonds is separate funding?
Yeah. So if we get funded through the ARPA, do you like how excited I am? I'm like, let me tell you about this.
Yes.
So the 1.4 is still there, and we're just so close to laying out the revolving loan fund program at no interest. And we wanted to do that for those funds because they didn't have that ARPA timeline, right? ARPA is saying you can't have loans, it must be grants. ARPA is saying you have to obligate it by this date and expend it by this date. So in order to perpetuate the program, we wanted to reserve the 1.4 in a revolving loan program moving forward. And that is still going to be for facility funds and potentially have that element for the, well, it should have the element for the emergency response piece of it, right? And we want to leverage it because that 1.4, if we can get additional, like we did with the 600,000 that we did for the first phase of it, which was the trainings and the grants, we were able to make that 600,000 through the support of first 5 into almost 1.1 million. We're looking to do that with the 1.4. So we're going to continue to add to that so that we have a bigger program moving forward. So that exists and that is not going to change. It is the ARPA funds that we're looking to modify. And so going from the children, the child care support program to the children and child care support program, it is only with the ARPA funding that we are adding in these additional elements, including that business support. And including still grants for facilities that will kickstart the revolving loan thing, but we can expend within these 2 years at no cost within the QCTs. So
Yeah.
hopefully that kind of clarifies.
It does clarify. I mean, I would be lying if I said I had a complete, if I could explain it to somebody else exactly, but I think I get it. And I just think about while it's a really challenging time to be in government, couldn't be a more exciting time to be able to make some of the things that we wanted to see go for a long time and get them into action. And I love the energy. I'm pretty happy about it. It's exciting to see you guys excited about it as well. I did want to pick up on one piece here around the permit refund. It's lovely that the permits are going to be, the fees are going to be refunded, but been going around with the water department on the water demand offset fees, and just how much a fee on the front end of something, or even the impending fee, can dissuade a potential business owner. And I'm wondering how much these fees are, and if there isn't a way for us to, you're saying they're county fees?
No, it's the, so I'm not including water fees. Water is a totally separate beast, and I would not be able to speak about them, but I am saying the fees that you have to pay when you're going through the permitting process through planning for like entitlements and such. And I can send out additional information on this if you'd like. It is those fees that are reimbursed.
So I don't know how much those fees are, but I'm guessing that if they're, anywhere over $100, it's going to be a significant disincentive to, I mean, if you're the kind of person that we're targeting to help with this kind of business, it may be something that you just don't have to wait to get the refund. And if I don't know if there's a way for us to use some of our ARPA funds to just pay for those fees, because this is something that we want. We want the business more than we want the fee.
Yeah, we can actually, sorry, I'm just pulling up to see if I can see quickly. Okay, so like the fees, so for child daycare, large family daycare home, which is 7 to 14 children, it is by right, and the fee went from nearly $4,000 to 0. So at the get-go, there is no fee for that. It is the childcare daycare center 15 or more clients. So those are more of the center, non-home based. They do need a minor use permit, which is a change. It's a lower permit, I believe. And the fee was reduced from almost 14,000 down to 3,800. But that's where the fees are reimbursed once they open.
Okay.
And
So
then,
we're not attaching a fee to these in-home uses.
that's
anymore.
correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
that's
So the
my main
in-home uses are
concern.
0. And then the third change that we made was new facilities over 10,000 square feet that have to have design review for childcare facilities. It only goes to the zoning administrator, so we streamline the process. But the bulk of what we see as in-home childcare is by right and has no fee attached to it.
Beautiful. That's
Yeah.
just great to hear. And then the other thing on kind of on a different topic, but related to your presentation was the UBI. And I just wanted to share that I was reading the other day about crime trends in the United States, and a bunch of they did a massive meta study of all these criminologists, and they were talking about the different types of things that really interrupt crime, and one of the top scoring things was a UBI and baby bonds and those types of things. So I just think it's great that we're talking about it, and we're gonna, I think if we're able to make this go, and I wouldn't put much past you, that we're going to be looking at a very different landscape in our community in 10 and 20 years. So I'm really excited to see that roll out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say upstream investment makes a massive difference, and you have to have faith in 10 years from now. And that's what economic development does. It's like we're always looking at not now necessarily, but 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I mean, if you change the trajectory of an infant toddler getting into high school, you change the trajectory of incarceration, you change the trajectory of family incomes, you change the trajectory of homelessness. I mean, it is probably one of the best investments that you can make in order to have a better, more solid, more resilient economy in a location if you invest in these ways.
Awesome, thank you.
Gives me chills to think of Santa Rosa as leading the way in this endeavor. I think for at least for our region, I think we're up there, if not on top of leading the way. So congratulations.
Yeah, I got a note from somebody in Oakland was like, they're like, oh yeah, we're noting it. I'm like, okay, then we have to do it. Oakland's watching.
Oakland's watching. Well, let's go to the community. Eileen, do we have any hands raised?
We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay. Well, this brings us to the end of our meeting this morning. Any final comments from the panel? Well, thank you all very, very much. This is all great news. It's a good way to start our day with the council meeting coming up in a couple hours, or my goodness, sooner than that. So it's going to be a busy day. And thank you very much for your participation and your attendance today.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.